Hey, you're watching Rethinking the Mundane with Jo and Lex.
Where an industrial designer and a creative technologist talk about the mundane objects in everyday life and try to give them new purpose. Today, we're going to talk about smartphones.
Now, a few years back, not even that long ago, this might not have been a mundane subject. But now, there isn't many people in the Western world who don't have a smartphone.
True.
And I can't remember what the stats are in terms of how many hours we are touching our phones every day, but it's hours. And that's like, it's crazy. You don't bat an eyelid when you see someone walking down the street holding a phone.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember when I used to see people walking down the street reading a book. Yeah, actually like walking down the street reading a book. And I saw someone the other day doing that on the canal, walking down the street, reading a book. And that was weird, but having somebody scrolling on their phone as they're walking down the street isn't weird.
Yeah.
That's in itself is weird.
Yeah. And I guess, like you mentioned, that the phone is the most intimate object we interact with, right? Because, we go to the toilet with it, we go to bed with it, we do everything with it. And it's literally so close to us. If we were to ask people, when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do? Do you check your phone first before you might speak to your partner? Or if you live with your partner or something, what would be the first thing you would do? And I know me, the first thing I do a lot of the times is my phone, because my alarm is on my phone, right? So then you get trapped and let me check my phone, let me see what's going on. So the smartphone is powerful. But Jo Morrama has done a lot of work in the past about, still currently about questioning the relationship with the smartphone. And you want to talk about that in more detail, that project?
It's an unreal phenomenon that we have brought this bit of kind of metal and glass into our lives and now can't seem to put it down. And there's less chatter about it now, but it's definitely present around the mental health effects that has.
Yeah.
And was it like 2018? We did a project and we worked a bit with you guys actually on how we could rethink the relationship with our smartphones by changing the sort of physical appearance of the phone. So like really subtle changes. One of the concepts was just that the back wasn't flat, and so it always rocked and it would sit facing ever so slightly away from you. And the idea was that would mean that notifications would be off, and the only way of pulling those notifications would be to basically rock the phone forwards. And then you would see them on the screen, and then when you let go, it would drop backwards again, and the notifications would come off. So it was turning push notifications into pull notifications with a physical action. And obviously, there's many ways that you could hack that for us, and you know full well that people would do that. But it was really to start a discussion around the fact that we need to start rethinking the way that we're designing phones to be less addictive, basically.
And when you talk about that, and you say that difference between push and pull, should I say? If you think of it from like that, I think there's this, what's the name of this book? I think it's called Hooked. And Hooked is this like book that's normally, I guess at one point when it came to like you're trying to launch a startup, there was these particular sets of books you would read or be suggested. And Hooked was one of them for designers in terms of this desire to design sticky experiences. How do you make things sticky? And I think in the book Hooked, it talks about how tech design follows a lot of design that you see in different sectors like gambling and stuff. And that term push, where you push to see something in a way that creates those dynamics which you almost, like you said, become pretty addictive. I think one of the things I've always liked about the project was, like you said, the changes were very subtle. And, one of my favorite ones was where you have the phone that has two screens, where you flip it on its back.
Yeah.
It has a reduce mode Actually, no. Yeah, that sends you. Well, there's two concepts. One where you turn it around and it gives you the reduce mode, and then there's one where you flip on the back where you just get simple notifications and those particular stuff. I guess now when we look at it in 2023, what would you say? Would you say that these things are still like those? Our relationship with the phone is still because I think that if I remember at the time, the essence was how do we make it clear that the smartphone is a tool and making that very distinctive that it's a tool to serve a particular purpose and it shouldn't be so immersed in our lives as much as. But I don't know how you feel now in 2023 because that's like 5 years ago now. So how do you think about? Do you still question the relationship with the smartphone, or
I think that the place that we've got to, or we're certainly going to get to, is that your phone is going to be, it's not a tool, it's an assistant. And with the kind of increase in development of AI, it's going to become a very, very intelligent assistant. I'm interested to see what happens. We won't need to necessarily, it won't necessarily need to look at the same. I would be really interested to see more phones that perhaps are not so heavily reliant on a screen, something you can just chat that can just pull kind of stuff in the back end. You can almost like voice control it rather than having something that you're looking at all the time. But I think it's going to become harder and harder and harder for us to see it just as a tool and not see it as an assistant. And with the introduction of obviously like not introduction of Siri, has been around for a long time, but kind of chat AIs that you're talking to, that's an emotional thing. That's a bonding thing. That's humans to humans. We're the only animal in the world that has the communication that communicates in the way that we do with each other. And when we start doing that with a machine more and more, you do start to build an emotional relationship. That's been proven, and so we will start to become very attached. Obviously, that AI assistant isn't tied to the phone. You would be able to, if you broke your phone, and go out and get another one. So it still becomes a gateway, a tool. But I think it's harder and harder for us to
and then
break those relationships.
And then what do you think as well from the hardware side, right? Because there's also, the phone is, it's this hardware container that contains this softwares inside of it that exists elsewhere and like a data server across. But like, I guess over time, it's like we've had different types of phones where, we would have flip phones, we would have flip phones, we would have, all these different BlackBerry. But like if you think of it, like, because there's something you said to me a couple of years ago, like 5 years ago, I don't know if you remember this, and it's like with smartphones in the early days, there was so much variety, so much creativity, so much diversity in terms of the different phone offerings you can buy and you can create. And what seems to have happened over the last maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years is this consolidation of phones very much across different brands look the same. And you can't tell. Maybe I think Samsung's quite different, but I think with some of the other brands, sometimes you can't see the same. And so, or now you've gone from phones where they were very small and very slim, and now you've gone from phones that are once again big again. And like, what do you think about that relationship with hardware where things have maybe become standardized across, and that might be because of the manufacturing process, but also this kind of like very standardized, repeatable kind of hardware design, should I say, that, and also the size of things.
I think the biggest driver in phone design is the screen. And that wasn't a thing when when smartphones first came up, because the resolution wasn't that great. There was no kind of camera mode as such. Or it was limited. You weren't really using it to view and edit photographs, put content together in the way that we are now. And now it's all about that content, really. I mean, it's so driven by content. So it really links back to our social media as well. And if you're driven by screen size, then the bigger the screen for the smallest sort of overall footprint, the better. And if brands are competing on that, then you basically are like, right, I've got a screen and then I've got a thickness to it and that's it. And so there's so little you can do with that. And obviously Samsung with the new flip phones have found some way of actually doing something creative in that space where you have the same size screen, but you can fold it in half. And it's like, well, that at the time when it first came out, I was like, wow, that's whack. Like, it looks terrible. Who wants a big old line down the middle of their screen? And now I'm like, it's creative at least, it's something different at least. I don't think I'd want it. Yeah, who knows? Maybe in 6 months I'll have one. But it's good to see something different.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've been working a lot with like AI and chatbots and that kind of relationship, interacting with technology, using voice and stuff. Do you see that becoming more of a thing in the phone?
I think with me, where smartphones, really, when I began to like question the screen as an interface was when I look at my grandma, and my grandma is very much a barometer for like how good is something I've built. If we talk about accessibility, my grandma is like the barometer, and she's somebody that once upon a time watched TV that was 5 channels. Okay, now you use Sky, you use the remote control. We're gonna have an episode on that soon. And then we used to write down like in a book, here are the numbers to press this button for your remote control. Then cool. So you've got this button interface. Yep. You have to press that. You have to turn on the TV. You know where the volume is. Cool. All right, cool. Grandma, now we're going to buy your phone. And this was interesting. Okay, Grandma, let's try it out. Cool. All of us here, we have our phones. We're used to swiping, very easily. Swiping is a simple gesture for us. Grandma swipe. My grandma would have this very vigorous, aggressive swipe, which the phone necessarily did not react to that type of gesture. Or my grandma's relationship with cameras, Once upon a time, cameras are like how we I just hit the mic. But once we sit here and the camera's right in front of us, I have this defined relationship with the camera at a distance, and I know where it's there, it's big, it's massive. But when we design, our front cameras to be very small and tiny that you might not even notice it's there, small, tiny, but powerful. When I call my grandma, she doesn't know who the camera is because you can't necessarily maybe see it right away on that interface. So she's like, I'm like, Grandma, okay, move your phone. Like, there's all of these different distances. And so for me, I began to question, like, okay, she needs a smartphone because there's loads of benefits. Like, she makes phone calls off WhatsApp. And WhatsApp allows her to call people in Nigeria and allows her to call her family. She can do video calls and all the stuff. However, there's certain gestures that doesn't work for her. And, there's a lot of phones in the market who are trying to cater to the elderly. But the challenge is still that behavior pattern has not been established. And that's obviously not the case for everyone. There, folks who probably same age as my grandma, they're probably really sophisticated and know how to use the mobile phone really well. But there's still that generation where maybe they were not exposed to the computer like us, living with computers, social media, what I mean? And so for me, I'm interested, like you made this point about an interface without a screen and with voice. And I'm interested in playing around with that a lot more. Like, what could an interface what could a smartphone without a screen look like and interact like with voice? Obviously, it's taking you back to those days where you would literally have a voice, you know what I mean? But like, when you take away the screen, what can you get? What can you see? What is that interaction that necessarily sort of happens?
How often do you use your phone to make a phone call?
I hate phone calls.
But why?
Because I'm drained and tired of the world already.
Isn't it ridiculous though? Like, isn't it where, I mean, maybe it's because we've got all these other options and they feel less, I don't want to say effort, but like they feel like safer. You've got an option to write a message and have a look at it. Have I written that right? Have I used the right language? Then I'll send it.
Yeah.
Or to say something and then, I'll just add something else. Or I'll just actually add something. Or I'll change my mind. Or I'll just not reply for a while. And I think, but it's obviously when you have a phone call, you have to be engaged in that call. You have to sort of give yourself 100% to that moment. And interestingly, if I have to make a call to someone, I'm like, I've got to make a phone call. At the end of the phone call, I feel great. Yeah. I feel like I really engaged with that person.
Yeah.
There was no reason for me not to have made that call. I wish I'd made it sooner. And there are definitely people who really, all they do is make phone calls. And they're happier people, I'm sure. But I think it's in trying to, we need to get back to that, or at least we have to enable that to happen really easily.
Yeah.
And I think the tech companies, it feels, have just sort of said, well, the generation that didn't grow up with phones and technology that we have, they're not gonna be around that long. Like, what's the point of investing in them? It's like, I don't know about you, but their generation is going to be around for a little while.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be seeing people living to 110, 115, maybe even older.
Jesus.
That's a long time for people to just not have access to accessible technology.
Yeah.
But on the note about the swipe, my aunt's we bought her like a tablet to do video calls over COVID, and it's got a stylus because she doesn't know how to touch it with she's got a stylus. But she has destroyed probably about 60 styluses.
Oh my God.
She rubs it so hard when she presses and she like swipes that the rubber bit just breaks off constantly, like going through them.
So from a design perspective, who's that when you've got that behavior pattern where the stylus, because now when I think about it, I'm like, maybe I should get something with a stylus on my grandma.
A reinforced one.
Yeah. But is that the material itself? Is that the choice of material? Is that the choice of like when you have that behavior, and if I said to you, okay, I've got this phone company and we are trying to focus on the elderly and we have this stylus that keeps breaking over time. What is that? Is that like a material aspect? Is that company not realize, like, is it just because it's an edge case? Is it, with those type of things, how do you I guess with hardware, because I know from a software perspective, right? My whole interest in using machine learning is this aspect of if you can train these personal assistants to create this personalized experience for you, it's quite easy to do that with a personalized. Maybe you can study this person, their behaviors, their habits, their things over time, and then maybe the intelligent agent is able to react and assist to that. Where with hardware, once you almost design it, it's quite fixed, right? So what happens in those?
Interestingly, my suggestion to fixing that solution would be sort of hardware, but actually maybe built into the onboarding process. Like, I mean, there's sensors that can be under the screen now that can sense the pressure of a touch.
Yeah.
And so, like, having an onboarding process that actually says, okay, now press and let go, and gets people to understand. Because one of the other things is how long you press for. If you press and wait for something to happen, actually loads of typing happens when you release the number. It comes up, and so the instinct is to press it and wait for the number, the letter, or whatever you want to happen on the screen to happen.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of getting around the idea of pressing something for a certain amount of time, pressing with a certain amount of force, swiping with a certain amount of force, a certain speed, and actually those interactions could be part of an onboarding process, and then you could use it's not even an intelligent level of machine learning to just pick up on when maybe they just need to retrain, kind of recalibrate. But obviously that is a fix to potentially a problem that could be solved in another way, there is also an argument that buttons are not a bad thing.
If you're taking away the buttons to accommodate the bigger screen.
But then you could also say, well, buttons are a fixed size, and then you would want to make them big for people who perhaps have poor eyesight, and then there was other people who have other accessibility potentially issues, but eyesight's not one of them, and then they don't need these giant buttons. So the good thing about having it all on the screen is that you can tailor it. You can have your font size one size, I can have mine the other. So there's so much freedom that comes from having a big screen that you can do anything with. It can become a number pad, it can become a video screen, it can become a photograph. But if not everyone's on the same level, of interacting with what is effectively just touching a bit of glass, we do have a problem, and it is a problem that people are just not addressing properly. But I think voice is something that's interesting because, I mean, I asked my grandmother to leave a voice message to somebody.
Yeah.
Or if she wants to, she's like, can I send a message to somebody? Then I just say, yeah, I'll hold it down. I'll say go and you can record the message.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Like when my grandfather used to leave a voice message, it would be perfect. How did we lose the ability to speak?
I didn't even know about how voicemail. That's about it, isn't it? It's a really interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, every time I was asked to leave a voice message, because I need to leave one, I need to speak to somebody and get them to call me back, I freeze. I'm like, and then some of them have an option where you can delete the message and record it. I've definitely done that before.
Yeah, I'm not used to it happening. I don't remember last time I just have voice notes, you know what I mean? We've just changed our interaction model. I guess my final point, just before we wrap up, what do you think as well about, from a sustainability standpoint as well with the materials used to create smartphones?
I mean, that's going to be a big challenge. So obviously we're currently reliant on battery technology, mostly lithium, mostly mined in South America, definitely not mined in a way that's good for the environment, for the local people, for the water resources around that area. There are other ways of, battery technologies kind of being developed, but they're not there yet. And yeah, I don't know how that's going to work when it comes to something that's small enough to fit in a phone.
Yeah.
Then there's also loads of issues with the precious metals and the raw materials that go into screens, and the coatings, like even just the coating on the screen that is conductive. And so it's a nightmare, but we're going to have to be really good at getting tech back. There's a lot of really interesting development in actually mining those materials back from even landfill now, but also from old phones. So being able to take the materials back out of phones and sort of put them into new ones. And then there are companies like Fairphone who are doing very bold steps in this space with regards to repairability. And I think there's something that's coming out about being able to swap out your battery, which I think is amazing, because obviously that's the first thing that goes, right?
Yeah.
So if it doesn't last a day, then you can't get home. In the evening. So I think that's a big step. And when I was at school, if my phone ran out of battery, I just asked my mate who had a Sony Ericsson as well, and he would just swap your batteries around and get a little bit extra. Yeah, remember?
I used to have a spare battery with me.
Yeah. You just swap the battery out, or you just borrow someone else's battery. And
oh shit, I forgot about that.
And like all of these little things, these little kind of touch points, these little like interactions and things that are really useful. They need to come back. They need to come back. Yeah. But we could talk about this for ages, and maybe we should do a whole other episode on this. If you want us to do a whole other episode on smartphones, then we will. But if you've got other topics you'd like us to chat about, do let us know. We've got some cool ones coming up, so stay tuned. Follow us on YouTube, or I think we're on TikTok now. Hope you enjoy it. You've been listening to Rethinking the Mundane with Jo and Lex.
Thank you so much.